Good morning, welcome to another game update video. Today, I'm going to go over the update that just happened while I was asleep and go over the news and various blog posts from the last week. The notification in game says you can now grab yourself your own instance of the Hallowed Sepulchre. Let's get into it. As I said, there's a few blog posts from over the last week, but we're going to start with the game update from today, Hallowed Sepulchre instances and more. If we go to the changelog, this is kind of like a summary of all the changes from this week. We got Sepulchre at the start. Let's just go down to the actual part of the news post right here. This is where it talks about Sepulchre. You can now pay 200 marks to be able to toggle on or off if you want Sepulchre to be instanced for you. If you haven't done Sepulchre, or even for a lot of people that have done it, this may not seem like a big deal, but the reason why this is important is because it makes Sepulchre consistent. When Sepulchre is empty and the first person enters, all the obstacles and moving parts, they have set constant spawn points, which makes the timing the same every time and it creates a better flow for the runs. But if you enter Sepulchre and there's already someone in there, the obstacles will not be starting from their static spawn points, and instead they'll just be at a random spot wherever they happen to be at. But once Sepulchre is empty, everything is instantly reset until the first person enters again, and then they'll have those initial static spawns for themselves. The only variable, which is other players, is completely out of anyone's control, and with the addition of instances, that problem is now solved. Even after explaining that, most of you are probably like, who cares, that's only for sweaty, efficient nerds. Well, I have a theory that 90% of OSRS players have some form of ADHD or autism, or both. And I want to remind you that just because someone has a different flavor than you doesn't make their preferences of how they enjoy the game invalid or unimportant, especially for a change that presumably takes minimal dev time and has no effect whatsoever on people that choose to not use it. But yeah, if you do want to unlock the private instances, it is 200 hallowed marks, which I don't have at the moment. But that's like an hour, maybe like 1 to 2 hours at the most to get that many marks. So it's a relatively easy unlock. Or if you're a completionist kind of person, that's probably something that you're going to want to add onto your list of things to unlock. The Carpenter's clothing has been buffed, which is the construction outfit you get from Mahogany Homes. You'll enjoy a slight boost to XP rates when wearing individual items. Wait, this is what it already does, the 2.5% boost for the full set, and you get it's already been that way, right? I have no idea why it's worded that way in the news post, because what I think the actual update is when you're doing Mahogany Homes, previously when you were wearing the outfit, you would only get the XP boost for building the things in the home, but you get the big XP drop when you complete the contract. Previously, the construction outfit boost did not apply to that big final XP drop, but now it does. Interestingly though, in the summary section, which is usually shortened versions of the updates, it's actually more descriptive in here. It says now boost XP when completing Mahogany Homes construction contracts. So it does say it in the news post, but not in the actual section of the news post, the full description. Going down, we have new Slayer boss, which I'll talk about later in the video because there's a separate news post all about that. The Deadman All-Stars, which I talked about in the previous game update video, the finale is going to be on Saturday, June 22nd at 6 p.m. British time, and it'll be live streamed on the OSRS Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/oldschoolrs. There's the RuneScape Kingdoms tabletop RPG. Apparently there's is that like a holiday called Free RPG Day, which I assume is talking about role-playing games and not the other type of RPG. On that day, you'll be able to get a free quick start guide, and you can find your local participating store by using the link in the news post, and this news post will be linked in the description. After the RuneScape Kingdoms thing, now we have the other changes section, and this is really like the rest of the changes from this week. Previously, Fishing Trawler would divide the number of fish caught between the remaining players at the end of the encounter. If I understand this correct, that would mean that if you had, say, like 50 people go in and then 48 people left before the game ended, then you'd have 50 loot divided into 2 people. So like 2 people get 25 times the amount of loot that you would normally get. So now the loot is divided by the number of players present when the ship sets off. So no matter how many people leave, you're still going to get the same amount of loot. In Bounty Hunter, there was previously an option that restricted the range of combat levels of your potential targets, requiring the target to be within 5, 10, or 15 of your own level, but now the option's been changed. Now this only controls the max level of your potential targets. You can control if you want them to be up to 5, 10, or 15 levels higher than you, but it does not affect the minimum level of your targets. But now the minimum level of Bounty Hunter targets is always 15 below your own for the minimum. There was a bug that would falsely claim you had obtained a clue scroll every time you open a clue casket when you had a master clue in your possession. That was kind of weird. Update the description of the Dark Lure spell, and then lastly, players can now dismantle ancient scepters when you have a quartz attached to them and you can reclaim the parts. I don't think I've ever made one of my scepters into any variations of them. So we'll take out the quartz here. Let's take out a blood quartz. We'll use that on the scepter. There probably used to be a warning that would say it was irreversible, but now there is no warning. I'm assuming there would probably be a warning, but now there's a dismantle option. And you can see there's no kind of cost or sacrifice to combine them or dismantle them. And that is the end of this week's game update. Now, like I said, there's a few blog posts that happened throughout the week, or that were posted throughout the week that I want to go over. Let's start with this one, Runefest, an important update. I talked about this a few game update videos ago. Runefest was originally supposed to be part of Insomnia, but Insomnia kind of fell apart because the company that would like put everything together, they laid off like everyone. Player One Events, that was the name of the company. And now Insomnia had to be canceled, which in turn means Runefest could not be held at Insomnia. Runefest was going to be early September this year, and they say that they tried to explore several options to still deliver an event in September, but despite their best efforts, they have not been able to do that. I assume that means they were trying to find an open venue within a reasonable budget and get vendors set up and set up transportation and accommodations for all the staff, and at this point it's probably cutting it too close to the time, I would imagine. What they're trying to do now is they're hoping to host the event in early 2025, which would be very interesting because in the past, Runefest has always been later in the year, like the start of autumn. It's always been like around September, October. So it'd be very interesting to have one that's early in the year. And I'm wondering if it's early, would that mean like February, like during the winter? Because I feel like that'd be not the ideal time to be traveling to the UK to enjoy time with friends out and about, you know. But then again, maybe the flight's out there if you're coming from a different country. Maybe it'll be cheaper if it's bad weather. It was originally going to be in Birmingham, but I hope whenever it does happen, whether it's early next year or at the normal time later in next year, I kind of hope they do it in Farnborough again. That's where it was in 2019 and 2018. Those were the 2 years I went, and I really liked it there. I thought it was a nice little quiet town outside of London. And they say up here that if you want to get a refund, you can. Otherwise, it sounds like the ticket will still be good for whenever the next Runefest is. Oh, it does say right here that they're trying to reschedule with the NEC, which is in Birmingham. That is where they were going to do it, but you know, nothing's set in stone. They could always change it. Now let's go back. We're done with this blog post now. There's two more we're going to go over. We're going to save the Slayer boss for last. Next, we're going to go bond price changes 2024. On June 25th, the prices of bonds will be changing. That means increasing, but the price of membership will remain unchanged. And the price of the bonds, you can see in this chart here, they have 1, 3, 5, and 10 as examples. The price, it's the same amount per bond, no matter how many you buy. So it's kind of interesting that they put different amounts on there. In US dollars, it's going to be changed to $9. I've never used real money to buy a bond before, so I'm not exactly sure how much they used to be, but I want to say it was $8 prior to this change. So for US dollars, I want to say it went up by $1. Actually, the bond prices aren't changing till next week, so I can very easily just check by trying to buy a bond right now. And yeah, so the price of a bond currently is $8 US. And also currently does not get cheaper the more you buy in bulk. Technically it gets more expensive because if you buy 10 bonds individually, wouldn't it just be $79.90? But if you buy 10 at once, it's $79.99. So it's technically more expensive to buy them in bulk. But maybe there's like extra fees associated with foreign transactions depending on your bank and stuff. So maybe it is better to buy the 10, I don't know. Like the post said, the actual cost of membership is not going up, and I assume when people buy bonds, it's not because they're trying to put membership on their account, but it's because they want to buy GP. So the cost of membership for 6 months, I'm not sure if this is because my account's grandfathered in or if this is the price for everyone, but it says $55 if you get 6 months at a time. That comes out to a bit over $9 per month. But throughout the year, sometimes they do the Premier Club membership, and if you get 12 months at a time, at least in years prior, I think it came out to like $6.66 a month. So it was under $7 a month, which is like crazy cheap when you take inflation into account. Like, you know, in 2007, I'm pretty sure it was $5. My main, by the way, is still grandfathered into $5 a month. But anyways, in 2007, I want to say it was $5 back then. So if we convert $5 to how much that amount would be now with inflation, that would be $7.57 now to have the same value of the price of membership. And it's pretty crazy that almost 20 years later, the amount of buying power required to get membership is cheaper than it would be when you take inflation into account. I'm kind of curious, if I switch this around 2024, can you like reverse it? So if you do $6.67 now, would that convert it to... Okay, so that'd be the equivalent to $4.40 in 2007. But even if you just go for the 6-month membership, which I would assume is available for purchase year-round, that's still equivalent to about $6 in 2007 money. All right, the bond section of this video is done. Now onto the final part, new Slayer boss, the Araxxor. The Araxxor is a new proposed Slayer mob that they want to add to Old School. In RuneScape 3, they've had the Araxxor since July of 2014, and it's going to be pulled to add it to Old School as well. You'll be able to get them as a Slayer task. There's going to be a lower level version of them, but there's going to be a boss called Araxxor. Araxxor the Araxxor, which is going to reside in the Araxxor hive beneath the Haunted Woods, but that is where the similarities end between RS3 and the Old School version they're proposing. This is not going to be a backport of the RuneScape boss. In bold, very clearly, they are not adding EOC to OSRS. I don't think it'd be possible even if they wanted to, because I don't know much about RS3, but there's all those special abilities and there's been so much power creep in that game. I assume a lot more compared to Old School, and it just would not be possible to copy it directly into the game. I'm sure the mechanics and special attacks and all that stuff is going to be quite different from RS3. And Araxxor is going to require 92 Slayer, and you'll have to be on Slayer task to fight him as well, just like with all the other Slayer bosses in the game. Next section is the fight. Slayer bosses can be tricky, as we learned with our last offering, the Alchemical Hydra. That's crazy, the last time they added a Slayer boss was Hydra. That was January of 2019. It's been 5.5 years, wow. It's really been that long since they've added a Slayer boss. Slayer bosses need to be interesting enough to feel engaging without being so tricky that they become boring. But they also need to reward you for all the time you spent leveling Slayer so far, which makes sense. For a level 92 Slayer boss, you would hope there's some decent loot, compared to something that's like Grotesque Guardians that's more mid-level, only requires 75 Slayer. It's pretty mediocre loot. They're not going to be listing all the mechanics right now because they do want it to feel a bit magical on the day of release, if/when it does come out. So of course they're going to keep a lot of things a secret. But they do want to say right up front that Araxxor is not going to be tough like the DT2 Awakened bosses or like Colosseum. It is a Slayer boss after all, and pretty much all the Slayer bosses in the game, while a lot of them do have a learning curve to them, I think the skill level required to do them, the skill level as a RuneScape player, is not difficult once you do get past those initial few KCs. They are kind of hinting at one mechanic though. You can choose to deal proactively with Araxxor's minions before they hatch for an easier but slower time, or set them loose and you'll kill Araxxor faster, but you'll have to survive their onslaught, and it'll be a tougher fight that way. And without giving away any specific spoilers, they do say that it is everything you would expect from a spider fight. There's gonna be smaller spiders, venomous acid, ferocious fangs, and a lot of legs. And they say that it is a melee-focused encounter. That's all they're gonna reveal about the fight itself, but what else they can reveal is the treasures, the rewards from Araxxor, the spoils. There's 3 categories of the different loots you can get from this boss. There's untradables, there's consumables, and there's unique equipment. And they're going to be starting off this list with the untradable rewards. First thing is the Araxxor Slayer Helm. There's probably going to be some kind of head drop that's going to be like 1 in 128 or 1 in 256 that you'll be able to use to make this Slayer Helm. I imagine it's probably going to be 1,000 Slayer points to be able to make this version of the helmet. The next untradable reward is going to be the Araxxor Pet. I would guess that this is going to be a 1 in 3k drop. And you know what this reminds me of? Not just the pet, but like everything about the boss in general. You know who this reminds me of? Jeff. You guys remember Jeff from Billy and Mandy? They're adding Jeff to OSRS. The third and final untradable would be the Jar of Venom, and this would be the first untradable jar if it's added. The first jar in the game was the Jar of Dirt, added with Kraken in April 2014, and it was originally supposed to be untradable, but it was accidentally left tradable. They never changed it, and all future jars added to the game were made tradable for consistency with that first one. In fact, Kraken itself is broken too, and the reason why it's such an underwhelming boss fight was due to a game engine bug that they decided to just leave in.
Kraken has literally does no damage to you, and that's a bug, but it's not a bug that we knew about because it's an engine bug. And it turns out there are 2 parameters on the Kraken file itself which cancel each other out, and both of them are being called in the code to do damage, but they're cancelling each other out so they don't do any damage. This is an engine bug, so it's not something we can test for. And I remember saying to Matt, well, not just Matt, but the team, I want to fix this because I did not design the Kraken to do no damage. And it's a shame that we have this boss that people enjoy doing as part of Slayer, which is a very popular skill, and my boss isn't doing that. I want to fix it. And I'm being told, no, it's a feature now. It's like, well, no, it isn't. It's a bug, and we can fix it, and we know what's wrong with it. And I don't like the fact that my boss is doing no damage. I want to fix it. No, you can't fix it. It's a feature.
In April of 2014, OSRS was at its all-time low player count, and that's the only year that I personally truly believe could have been the end of OSRS. The long-term outlook of the game, of course, was unknown at the time. It's easier to see it now in rose-colored glasses, but at the time, we didn't know what was going to happen. There wasn't the strongest sentiment by players, and probably not by the JMods either, especially when you look at the type of content that had been added around that time, that some may not consider healthy if you're looking for long-term sustainable growth. And it was more so the type of content to keep the current players that were still actually playing the game as interested as possible for as long as possible. Anyways, all of that to explain what I think is part of the justification for screw it, just leave the jar of dirt tradable and keep the next couple jars tradable for consistency. By the time we had realized the game was going to be sticking around, there was kind of like a sunk cost fallacy going on, like, well, we've already added so many jars that were tradable at this point, may as well keep going. Fast forward 10 years, and now we're being proposed the first untradable jar. I highly doubt they would go back and make all jars untradable, especially considering the cost of some of them, but if this passes, it might pave the way forward for all future jars that come out to be untradable, or maybe this would end up being a one-off thing, who knows. As for the drop rate, my initial guess would be 1 out of 2k to put it in line with a lot of other jars in the game, but because this would be the first untradable jar, I also wouldn't be surprised if they did make it more common, like 1 in 1500 or 1 in 1k even. It'd probably end up being 1 in 2k though. I mean, it really depends on how fast the kills per hour are, but it'll probably be 2 to 3 minutes per kill to put it in line with other Slayer bosses at a similar level. Next we have consumable rewards. First we have the Araxxor Venom Gland. This is consumable, it'll deal 4 venom damage while curing and providing 20 seconds of immunity to venom. It could help in a pinch at Araxxor if you run out of anti-venom, or you can also use it to make a brand new extended anti-venom plus potion at an unspecified herblore level. Currently we have anti-venom pluses, which each dose gives you 3 minutes of venom immunity, but with the extended anti-venom pluses it would make it 6 minutes per dose rather than 3, so you'd have 24 minutes of anti-venom with a single inventory slot, and that'll be great for fighting more Araxxor. And one more consumable would be teleport scrolls that would teleport you back to the boss, and it says it'd be a fairly common drop, and by the time you get comfortable with the fight and you have longer trips, you should be able to get on average at least 1 teleport scroll per trip that you do. And the last section here is the equipment rewards. First thing we have is the boots, the Araxxor boots. Here's the stats of the boots. They're meant to be tribrid boots. They're pretty bad stats, and I've seen a lot of people complaining about these, so I wouldn't be surprised if they buff them at least once before it goes into the pull. They have a special effect that prevents you from getting caught in a spider web, assuming you haven't already been caught in the last 10 seconds. So it looks like there's gonna be a 10-second cooldown. These will prevent you from getting caught in the webs at Verzik, unless you run into 2 webs in a row, which definitely happens. Although with the current stats, I can't see people actually bringing these into TOB, so we'll see what happens with that. You could save some run energy at Venenatis if you accidentally step into the web there, or for Syrachnus' web that it throws out. Next up, we have the Noxious Halberd. Halberds are traditionally known to have 2 uses. The first one is for being a spec weapon that people bring for bigger monsters like Bloat, for example, because it hits really big. And the other use that they're known for is being used by noobs to safe spot monsters, especially their Slayer tasks, or Tazar creatures for some reason. But halberds are traditionally really bad for DPS because they're a 7-tick weapon, but the Noxious Halberd, this is meant to be a DPS halberd. This one is only going to be a 5-tick weapon. And here you can see the stats. It says that for context, it's supposed to be similar DPS to a Blade of Saldor. Its 5-tick attack speed means it scales worse with gear than the 4-tick blade, so it will not be best in slot. It also has a special effect where it has a 33% chance per swing to inflict venom, or 50% chance if you have the Serp Helm on. That's like a passive effect. It doesn't say anything about having to charge it up, but besides for that special passive effect, it also has a special attack. It'll cost 60% energy and it'll cure poison or venom that you have, and increase your next attack's accuracy and damage by that percent. The special attack sounds kind of niche, but the whole weapon overall is kind of meant to be niche. In fact, I would almost describe this weapon as like a learner weapon if you're trying to learn content. I guess I should explain halberds in case you don't know. A halberd allows you to attack from an extra tile away, so there can be 1 tile in between you and the monster, and you'll still be able to hit. And they say, how valuable is this extra attack range? And they list some use cases for it here. This is the first use case that initially popped into my mind when I heard about this, and they list it right here. I think this is really cool. For Verzik's second phase, there's a 4-tick step back method you need to do at Verzik to avoid getting hit by the balls, while also avoiding getting bounced back by the boss. Typically, the way people learn is by staying back for 3 ticks and quickly stepping in for the 4th tick to hit and then stepping immediately back. But once you get comfortable, you stand next to the boss for 3 ticks and you only step away for 1 tick and immediately walk back to the boss to hit it. This is the part where learners always die at, and I think it's the biggest bottleneck for new people trying to achieve their first deathless TOB run. But with the Noxious Halberd, people that are new to TOB can stand back a tile and won't be bounced back. They'll only have to worry about walking 1 tile back and forth to avoid the balls being thrown at them. And yes, it is going to be less DPS compared to having a blade, or especially a scythe, but they'd probably be dying right away if they had to do the step-back method, and being dead is pretty low DPS for the team. There's so much going on at Verzik when you're new, and cutting out just this one mechanic, the bounce back, can make a huge difference towards whether or not you survive. And as the person gets more and more comfortable with all the other mechanics going on, they can then start to incorporate doing the step back method by starting with 2 tiles in between them and the boss and trying to get the timing. And if they do get overwhelmed at any point or they get bounced back once and get flustered, they can just go back to leaving only 1 tile in between them and the boss and go back to safe spotting for the rest of the fight and try again the next run. This will be an amazing weapon for TOB learners, and even if the stats or the special attack or other things need to change, either way, that's not going to change the fact of its usefulness being a halberd, being able to attack from an extra tile away. Another example they give on here is staying further away from a burning teammate in chambers at Ulm. And I would also like to know what kinds of use cases you could think of for the Noxious Halberd besides the stuff mentioned here and besides like safe spotting Slayer mobs. As of right now, Zora is immune to melee, but what if they change Zora so that you could melee Zora and then you could use this weapon at Zora, and the special attack you can also use to cure Venom. So that would be, I don't know, that would be like an interesting use case. If imagine people bringing tribrid switches into Zora, like a different combat style for each of Zora's phases. I just thought that'd be interesting. But let's move on to the next thing, the Amulet of Rancor. This is also the last thing on the list, so I'll get you out of here soon. The Amulet of Rancor is going to be the new best in slot melee amulet. It is going to be better than the Amulet of Torture. Compared to the Torture, this has +5 more accuracy for each of these styles, and it has 2 extra strength bonus. They both have +2 prayer though, this and the Torture. I think it's good that there's going to be a better melee amulet than the Torture because I want to show you right here the stats of the Torture compared to a couple other amulets. You can see it's +15 for the accuracy and +10 for the strength. When you compare it to the Fury, it's a little bit less accuracy and 2 less strength, but you also get more prayer and a lot of defense with the Fury. So there is a trade-off that kind of makes the Fury, it's not necessarily better, but for some people it has its use cases. But then when we go back to the Torture, compare this to the Amulet of Strength. I mean, this is a 1k piece of gear that you can get. Anyone can get this for practically free. It has no stats, but it has +10 strength bonus, and strength bonus is kind of one of the most important things. This is a free amulet compared to an endgame Amulet of Torture. They both have +10 strength bonus. Of course, you don't get the accuracy and you don't get the prayer bonus, but relative to the cost and how easy it is to obtain, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about. You know how much people talk about strength bonus being important, and it's the same strength bonus. And if you spend most of your time AFKing Slayer mobs, I mean, most of them don't really have much in the way of defense, so the accuracy shouldn't make that much of a difference anyways. The requirement to equip this is going to be 90 hit points. Compared to any Zenite equipment, those all require 75 hit points. Is this made from a Torture, or is this going to be like its own separate thing? Because it doesn't say anything about the fact that you have to upgrade this from something. It sounds like it's its own thing. In which case, that'd be very interesting, because like as an Iron Man, now you might only want to go for 3 Zenites instead of 4 of them, since the Rancor will be better in every single way than the Torture. Then again, you would have to wait until at least 92 Slayer and at least 80 something crafting, but by the time you would normally get a Torture on an account, you might already have those requirements anyways. So, well, you definitely have the 80 something crafting if you were able to make a Torture, since that requires 98 crafting. Another thing it says here is that you will be able to buy and trade these, so the Rancor will be tradable. UIM's Rejoice, you will be able to put it into your looting bag. We'll see what happens though, because remember, none of these numbers are set in stone. None of the stats, none of the requirements, nothing is for sure. For all we know, some of these rewards might not even pass the poll. In fact, the boss itself might not even pass the poll, because as we all know, it is very rare that things actually pass the polls, especially things that are PVM or Slayer related. I've just spent a bit of time now reading some comments on social media, and I've seen a couple common complaints. One is that the Rancor should be an upgrade to the Torture and required 99 crafting to make, And that makes sense to me, although I am biased having an Iron Man perspective. Another one I saw is that we already have too many spider pets and spider bosses in the game, so we should scrap the whole idea. Well, I quickly threw together this list. It is very possible I missed some, but I think this should still get the point across. We already have a bunch of dog pets in the game, like 3, arguably 4. We already have 4, arguably 5 bird pets in the game. But we only have 3 spider pets. I don't think it would be out of the ordinary to have a boss be the same class of monster as another boss. On top of that, all the current spider pets are pretty big and take up a full tile, if not even a bit more, but I think the goal with this pet, the Araxxor pet, is it's supposed to be really tiny. Like, imagine the small spiders in Lumbridge. I'm thinking something like that. Also, if this boss comes into the game, it probably means we'll get another variant of the spider hat. Slayer is my favorite skill in the game, so naturally, I'm personally excited, seeing as if it gets added, it'll be the first Slayer boss in almost 6 years. Slayer bosses are great for me because they're not too challenging, so I can actually do them. And I personally enjoy grinding out hundreds or even thousands of KC at all the current ones. They're just perfect to zone out to, in my opinion. So let me know in a nasty, dirty little comment what you think about how EOC is taking over and the game is dying. Bye!